Okay, we are now into the YouTube that goes with Module 2. Module 2 is a very interesting module because the folks that put that together are very interested in giving you a conceptual framework to work with. We're big on conceptual framework at Morgan, if you haven't already spotted that. And looking for key ideas. I didn't like any of the readings particularly. They're somewhat dated. So I put a set of slides together based on some work that I had done some years ago. And if you're not familiar with the work of a guy named Jim Collins, whose best known work is From Good to Great, he uses an analogy of a bus. I chose to use an analogy of a canoe. So look at the slides that are there on the canoe. And his business with the bus was get the right people on the bus in the right seats. If there are people resisting, get them off the bus. He says the same thing about the canoe, so that's fine. He makes some interesting points. He talks about a blending of assessing from a generic institutional sense to a more operational sense, which gives you programmatic settings or service settings. If you're in student success, it's obviously services. If you're in instruction, whether credit or non-credit, you're talking more about delivery of a discipline-based evaluation. Okay, one of the other things that he talks about, and it's another interesting one if you play with it properly, specifically what I'm talking about, he makes an analogy on the slides to carefully select whether you use a carrot or a stick. Now, when you're dealing with external stakeholders, you really can't use the stick very well, but you can use the carrot. So the issue would be look carefully at the kinds of rewards that mean things to people. They wouldn't be serving as external stakeholders to the college if they did not think that there was something, whether there's some kind of internal feeling they have about the institution or some sort of external process that or goal that they have for the college. So play that very, very carefully. I like very much slide number 5. It tries to give you a gestalt of how all the pieces of this go together. So take a look at it. It's not mine. I forget where I sold it from. But it is, I think, very, very utilitarian. Along with it, please keep in mind that you will have to make some adaptations. This is probably the umpty-ninth time I've said something, either in responding to your papers or in the first YouTube, the issue of looking at the culture of the institution, making sure that your planning system, whatever it may be, and there are varieties of them out there, whatever it may be, that there is an integration between adaptation to the culture and meeting the core target goals that any planning process is there to set up. And then, so therefore, no one size ever fits all. The other thing you have to keep in mind, if you have not already looked at it from years ago, Murphy's Law. Some things go wrong at the worst possible time is his main law. But there's another one too, that one of the corollaries to Murphy's Law is simply that everything takes longer than it takes. So when you start to talk about when are you going to roll out the plan, one of the things you'd better do is say, well, we're going to do it we're going to start looking at it in April as the year is winding down. And we're going to roll out the new plan when you come back in August. Why don't you just decide you're going to roll it out the 1st of October? There's a reason that you can justify that because that's the start, for example, the federal fiscal year, which has an awful lot to do with what many of us do in terms of our delivery of services. And we have to rely on the Fed, and it's kind of hard to get started at one point, and then the other part that'd be with is you're kind of waiting you have a stagger to make up if you go beyond October the 1st, or go beyond July the 1st. So that's just one way of doing it. Another thing that goes with that, another person that I would very much like you to be familiar with, will be helpful to you as you progress through the program. There was a British bureaucrat, actually. He worked in the British Admiralty Office, which is one of the most important offices in British government. His name was C. Northcote Parkinson, and he had a number of laws. The one that most appropriate to planning is work expands to meet the time allotted to get it done. Most of us, if we're in a 15-week semester and we know we have a final synthesis paper pulling it all together. Probably wait till week 12, maybe week 13, maybe burn the midnight oils. One of the nice things about our program, and there are times when I know you don't care for it, but the fact that you only have 5 weeks does not grant you the opportunity to be that laissez-faire. So anyway, just keep that in mind, that work will expand, and so take care of yourself. And when you're working on the planning system, roll out aspects of it, pilot some things before you hit that, say, October deadline I mentioned a few minutes ago. Now, something else that I think is very important, and I'll say more about that in the next module, but in this module we have to talk about 2 things that get peripheral treatment at best, and that is dangerous. The first is scanning. One of the things that you'll pick up in almost anything you read today that has anything to do with education is that the only constant we have in the 21st century is change. And since you're dealing with change that way, you must constantly be examining the environment that you are serving, looking for unanticipated changes. And environmental scanning is something I find, altogether too lacking in attention. People just don't see why it's important. We've got our plan, we'll live with our plan, and then all of a sudden, something new pops up that there's no way you could have prepared for. But if you have some alternative elements, would be they resources or time or personnel, you're not going to be trapped. And that's critical. Okay, the second one, which only within the last decade or so has become a critical part of the plan, and that is assessment. You can't get away from assessment today. Everything is about assessment. Every facet of the school comes under examination. Again, I will be spending time in the next module talking a little bit about what is probably the most significant assessment context you have to be aware of, and that is to continue to do what you do, whether it's providing a service, whether it's preparing students to be, I don't mean to be crass, but to be a product that is to have a degree. You have just got to be aware of what the accreditation people are doing. More about that later. Okay, what else should I say here? The decisions you make, I've seen this used from anything as simple as test questions to the entire planning process. Your decisions, your structure, your design should be smart in its structure. It should be specific, measurable, aggressive but achievable, results-oriented, and time-specific. That's smart. And it is smart to do it that way. All of those enter into everything else that we have talked about thus far. So let's talk about how this thing begins. And then that will segue into the third one. Okay, it starts with its own sort of structure. It starts with a vision. One interesting thing about visions, most of us will write up a vision that may take 2 pages. Wrong. Vision to be kept in the forefront of people's minds should be big enough to be meaningful, yet short enough to appear on the back of a business card. The last president I worked with at Hagerstown didn't quite take that seriously. He gave out something about the size of a business card, but it had vision on one side and it had mission on the other. It would better, in my mind, it wouldn't worried so much about printing both sides of the card as to print the one that said vision, because that is what we're really trying to sell. Okay, the next one is mission. We have to be prepared for the mission. And a very useful tool to looking at the mission in an effective manner is something called SWOT, S-W-O-T, SWOT analysis. What does that mean? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That is part of environmental scanning, but it's also a way to look at your system. And I think it's very, very important. And then as whatever you're designing, I don't care. When I built this course, I looked at goals for the course, I looked at objectives for the course, and I looked at learning procedures that would get us there. Do the same thing, any program you're running, any service you're delivering. Look at goals, objectives, and steps. And the other most critical thing about that, and I can't overemphasize this, is as you put this stuff together, don't hide it inside your coat. Don't keep it up here only. You've got to recruit your internal stakeholders. And trust me, we'll have a great deal to say about that in a few minutes. So that ends Module 2. I'm now going to go into Module 3 because my technician is going to take a much-deserved vacation.